Hi everyone, Kevin here, back to talk about sugar in grapes. Let's get going. This slide puts it in context. We talked about the first three items in the module. Now we're on to topic 4. Here are the main sugars in grapes: glucose and fructose. It's normally about 50-50 glucose and fructose when the grapes are harvested. We'll talk about yeast consumption of sugars. Glucose gets consumed first. So at the end of fermentation, it's primarily fructose that remains. Now you've seen the Fisher projections for glucose and for fructose. You know, of course, that both of these are 6-carbon sugars, right? So they're both hexoses. And glucose has the aldehyde group, so it's an aldohexose. Fructose has the keto group, so it's a ketohexose. Remember in the Fisher projections that all of the horizontal lines are coming out at you. Okay? But also don't get confused, because remember that each of these carbons is sp3 hybridized, and so the geometry around those carbons is tetrahedral. So it's not like you're looking at a straight chain of carbons 1 through 6, but actually they bend around because each of the carbons is tetrahedral. Sometimes I like to look at these nata, if that's how you pronounce it, the Italian professor who invented this projection. But I like to look at these because it shows the stereochemistry at each of the carbons. And of course I said each is sp3 hybridized. That is not true for that carbon at the top. The one in the carbonyl, that of course is sp2 hybridized. And so that is a planar orientation, 120 degrees between bonds, bond angles of 120 degrees. So that's sp2. All the others are sp3. And the nata projection shows that stereochemistry a little bit better. At harvest, we look at sugar levels. Sugar levels are extremely important to when we pick grapes. They're indicative of ripeness. Of course, every fruit gets sweeter as it gets toward ripeness, and that again is the grapevine saying to birds and other animals, hey, it's time to eat this fruit. The seeds are ripe, so eat the fruit. Take the seeds and deposit them on the next hill, and they are ripe enough and mature enough that they can grow a new grapevine. So we don't want the fruit being consumed until the seeds are mature. This chart tells a little bit about the relative levels of sugars. Each of them is a range because winemakers make a decision based not just on sugar, but also on acid and also on flavor. We'll talk more about those. So you see that if we're down around 140 to 160 grams per liter, that's not quite ripe enough to make a decent wine. But when you get up to about 170 to 200 grams per liter, that's great for sparkling wine. So champagne, we pick grapes early. We like high acid and simple flavors. That's beyond the scope of this class, but I'd be happy to talk about it if you'd like. But we always pick sparkling grapes first. So sparkling harvest in the North Coast usually starts as early as July in Napa Valley. As the harvest season, the ripening season progresses, then sugars increase. And when we get to somewhere around 210 to 230 grams per liter, that's the level at which we pick typically for a white wine. Again, this is a range, and winemakers can pick whites higher. You often see Chardonnay at 24 degrees Brix, or I'll explain degrees Brix in a minute, or 240 grams per liter. But the general range is that white wines are 210 to 230. Red wines then go 220 up to 260. All right, those are typically a higher sugar content than white grapes. We tend to pick white grapes early in the harvest season and red grapes later. But that's not entirely true. Pinot Noir, a red grape, often comes in other words, is picked before Chardonnay. So it varies, but these are the general ranges for sugar at harvest. Now note that we use metric units, but we also use imperial units. So here, sugar is often measured in grams per liter. But in the wine cellar, we use gallons, an imperial unit, and we use pounds. And so we're often converting between metric units and imperial units. And I'll show you more of where that's important as we come across those imperial units. What does 250 grams per liter of sugar look like? Let's compare it to some of the other compounds of interest in wine. Say we had 3 top-loading balances, and we were going to weigh out representative amounts of sugar in the first case, and then acid, and then phenolics. Remember, these are the 3 compounds, the 3 classes of compounds that we look at when we're assessing ripeness. If we looked at sugar, we'd see probably about a cup of sugar or more, all right? It's be a big pile of sugar on that top loading balance, probably a cup or more, and that's sugar per liter. So a lot of sugar in grapes. Acid, on the other hand, would be just a small amount, because representative amounts of acid per liter are about 6 grams per liter in a typical wine. All right, so sugar might be in a red wine at harvest up to 250 grams per liter, where acid would be only 6 grams. So a little acid goes a long ways. All right, so keep these representative levels in mind. Lots of sugar in ripe grapes, a little bit of acid goes a long ways. Phenolic compounds in a wine, we might be talking about something like 2 grams per liter in a finished red wine. All right. We can weigh out phenolics. You can buy phenolics in a powdered form, and those are isolated from grape skins or from oak barrels. And you could add those in. But again, we'd be talking about a very small amount on our top loading balance, a couple grams per liter. So keep these amounts in mind. At harvest, lots of sugar, a little acid goes a long ways, and a little phenolics also goes a long ways. All right. That's it for video number 1 and topic 4. See you in video number 2.